Let me tell you something that I don't often say out loud. I'm not afraid of failure the way I used to be. I'm afraid of faith. Faith is trusting Jesus with myself when obedience has a real cost. I'm not afraid of the idea of it. I'm not afraid of the belief in it. But I'm afraid of the lived reality of trusting Jesus when the costs are real and the outcome is unknown. I've learned that the deeper I go with him, the higher the stakes feel. And the more that I open myself up to the people he puts in my life, the more that I have at stake if he doesn't show up. And that's why compassion is so difficult. Because caring puts me in places where I am no longer in control. I can't protect myself with distance and with my own good intentions. And often, staying means skipping something else and letting someone down. Presence means a direct encounter with my own futility. And obedience means breaking something that I have carefully built. We don't talk about this enough. Faith is not like preparing for something difficult. If I want to walk a high wire, I'll practice and practice and practice until I trust myself. But faith doesn't work that way. Jesus never asks me to repeat the last thing that I mastered. His invitations are always to something new, unexpected, and unsettling. That's scary because I confuse trustworthy with predictable. The Bible never describes God as predictable, only as faithful. But I want a God that I can rely on because I know exactly what he will do. But once I name Jesus as Lord, the only control I have left is to manage him, to limit how far I'll follow him, and to decide when obedience stops. Because I know where Jesus goes. Jesus goes toward suffering. Jesus goes toward loss. Jesus goes toward people in pain. And honestly, I don't want to go there. Not fully. Because I don't want to suffer. I don't want to lose. And I don't want to prove what I already believe, that resurrection only comes after death. I also know I'll never experience the fullness of freedom if I keep holding Jesus at arm's length. Because the people who are most desperate for his presence need someone who is willing to go where others won't. And that leaves me with a question that I can't avoid. Do I actually believe Jesus will bring me through anything that I face, even suffering and even loss? Or do I just want that to be true? And the answer to that depends on something deeper. Do we know Jesus, or do we know about Jesus? Many of us know about Jesus. We know what he taught. We know what he did. We can describe his resurrection. But that kind of knowledge is contained. It informs us, but it doesn't move us. Jesus isn't contained like that. Faith flows out of not information, but out of an encounter. We move from fear toward faith, not because of courage, but a deep desire. I want to know Christ. Knowing Christ means listening to his voice, not just collecting his words. It means asking him what he thinks and what he wants, and trusting him enough to respond before the fear has quieted down. We move while we are still afraid. That's because knowing Christ doesn't come from courage. It's produced by it. Over time, this is how Christ forms a community, a people who can love without retreating, who can remain without being hardened. This courage comes from walking with him and letting him supply what we lack and protect what matters most. Discomfort does not undo us. It reveals who is with us. This courage leads us further. As Philippians 3:10 reads, I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection and the sharing of his sufferings. Not as separate experiences, something unified. Our knowledge of resurrection often feels distant at the end of the story. But Jesus leads us into circumstances that are uncomfortable, inconvenient, even painful, so that it becomes something that we experience. He doesn't remove us from suffering. He enters it with us. And in these moments, we discover the power of his presence, one that does not retreat when the circumstances intensify, one that redefines the meaning of suffering. No longer isolation, no longer futility, no longer the evidence that something has gone wrong. It becomes the place where vulnerability heals. Where fear loosens its grip, and where love begins to take precedence over self. In Christ, the power of resurrection is encountered within suffering. And this is what it means to know him. This is what it means that faith is possible while fear remains. Accepting Jesus' invitation into suffering means we need to learn to let go of the way that we've avoided it. We have learned to narrow our lives and to control what we let in, choosing carefully who we let in, where we go, and what we feel. When suffering seeped in, we've numbed it. We've distracted ourselves, and we've looked away. And if that were enough, we would never need resurrection. We know that life. We lived that distance, that quiet disregard. Then we found life in Jesus. And as he opens us, we start to see the suffering that is all around. And we want to love, but we're afraid of what it will cost us. Because in this world, people get hurt. People turn away. People leave. Not Jesus. Jesus stays. And as we choose to stay with him, we learn that suffering does not destroy us. His love loosens fear's grip, and we discover that suffering is not our identity. It is the condition of the world that he sent us to love. Follow that. Suffering is the condition of the world he sent us to love. It's the ache that tells us things aren't as they should be. And it's the provocation to respond to it. This is resurrection at work. It's not the absence of pain, but the freedom to remain present and not become undone. Becoming like him in his death is letting the fear of the unknown dissipate. Much of what we call discernment is fear that we've learned to justify. But free of fear, love becomes richer. A love that stays. A love that hopes. Love that enters the pain of another and brings with it that quiet, indestructible life of Jesus. I can't help but connect this to the situation of our world today. We live in a moment that feels like society wants to tear itself apart. And in that moment, trying to claim that Jesus has taken one side or the other is just going to increase division and bring about more isolation and despair and destruction. Do we have the courage, the faith to enter into places where our reputation might be harmed because it looks like we're condoning something in order to bring the love of Jesus? I pray that I do, because I see a world that desperately needs the healing that only He can bring about. And I hope that my fear does not interfere with my willingness to act on that faith. We're going to take communion in a moment, and while I'm distributing the elements, I'm going to ask Pastor Yeshua and Johnny to come back up here, because I am so pleased, I admire so much that you are willing to stare down the fear of what it means to go to people who might not even understand you and share the love of Jesus, and to discover what that does to them and what that does to you. And I want to hear a little bit of your story. So I'm going to pass out the elements. If you're visiting with us today, or if you're not taking communion with us before, there are 2 cups. Take them both. The bottom cup has the bread. The top has the juice. I ask you to listen to Johnny and Pastor Yeshua and reflect on their story and reflect on your own, and then we'll take communion together. Thank you.